message sat unsent for 11 minutes. I typed it at 1:47 a.m. I know the time because I looked at the clock the moment I started typing. The way you check something precisely when you know you shouldn't be doing it. Her name. 2 words after it. I sat there with my thumb above the screen, the refrigerator making that sound it makes, the city doing nothing in particular outside the window. And I thought about whether I had the right to press send. I had been the one who went quiet. Not with a word. Not with a night that ended badly. Just a slow recession. Responses that stretched from 1 day to 3, to something that stopped being responses at all. And then 6 months had passed. And I was in the apartment I had told myself I needed, sitting at 1:47 a.m. with her name lit up on a screen. I did not send it. But the specific shape of almost. That is the thing I can't stop returning to. I grew up watching my father love my mother from a precise and managed distance. He was not cold. He showed up. He sat at the kitchen table every evening, asked about school, fixed things when they needed fixing. And he meant all of it. But there was a layer of himself he kept sealed. Not hidden, more like held in reserve. Like a man who had learned somewhere before I could observe the learning, that fully spending yourself on another person was a structural risk. He had decided the risk wasn't worth taking. I was 9, maybe 10, sitting at the kitchen table, watching him read while she talked about her day. And I noticed he was there, and also somewhere slightly to the left of there. I filed it away the way children file things. Not as a lesson you choose, as a template you absorb without knowing you're absorbing it. By 22, I had built an entire philosophy on top of it, without ever meaning to. I called it independence. I called it not needing too much. I was warm, functional, good at showing up in the legible ways, the remembered details, the right questions, the kind of attentiveness that reads as care. And was care. But care with a ceiling built into it that I never mentioned, and most people never reached. I was 26 when I met her, at a work event neither of us wanted to attend. She was standing near the window with water instead of wine. When we talked, she listened in a way that made me feel like I was saying something worth listening to. Not performed interest. Actually in it. Actually tracking what I said and where it was going. We talked for 40 minutes. Around minute 20, I realized I'd stopped performing. That should have felt like a gift. For a long time, I did not know what it felt like. We were together for 14 months. I'm aware that is not a long time. From the inside, it had the density of something longer. Not because it was hard, because of the specific quality of her attention, which I didn't know how to name then, and I'm only marginally better at naming now. There was a Sunday in October, 8 months in. We went to a hardware store to find a light fitting for her kitchen. She spent 12 minutes looking at lampshades, approximately 11 minutes longer than the task required. At some point, she lifted one up, held it toward the window, to see the light come through the pattern in the fabric. I stood there watching her do it, and I thought, I want to do Sundays like this. Not just this one, all of them. I told her things I hadn't told anyone. Not confessions, nothing with stakes, small true things. A fear I'd carried since university about a specific kind of failure I'd never fully named. The gap between the version of me that existed in meetings and the version that existed at 10 p.m. on a Sunday, when the day was over and there was nowhere left to perform. She listened to all of it, without trying to fix any of it. A friend from university got married around month 8. At the reception, after the speeches, he found me at the bar. He said, "You look different lately. Not bad different. Like something fits." I said I was just tired. He looked at me for a second. Then he said, "You know you're allowed to just say you're happy." I didn't answer. I got us both another drink and changed the subject. But driving home later, I thought about why those 4 words had made me want to immediately be somewhere else. Why the thing that should have been simple to say had felt, when he said it, like something I needed to put down. I think, without knowing it, I had already started building the exit. The recession had begun before I knew I was receding. By month 10, I had started spending more time at work. Not obviously, not with any visible urgency. Just available for the calls that could have been skipped, present for the Friday evening that could have ended at 6, accepting the weekend project that could have been declined. I filled the space with things that looked like ambition, and were partially ambition, and were also something I was not ready to name. She noticed. She said it the way she said most things, directly, without decoration. One night in February, she said, "You're somewhere else a lot lately." I said work had been heavy. That was true. Work is an excellent place to hide. Nobody questions it. Nobody's allowed to. I had started having a thought I recognized as irrational, but couldn't stop having. That I needed more room. That something in me wasn't finished yet. Wasn't ready. The thought had the syntax of self-awareness and the logic of fear, and I could not locate the seam between them. In March, I sat across from her at her kitchen table. She made tea. I let mine go cold. And I said the things I'd been rehearsing for 3 weeks. About timing. About not wanting to keep giving her something fractured. About how this was about me, and not her. Which was technically accurate. And also the cruelest sentence you can say to someone who has done nothing wrong. She listened to all of it. When I finished, she said, "Okay." Just that. I walked home and told myself what I was feeling was relief. It was not relief. But it was close enough to fool me. For a while. Which was all I needed it to be. For the first 4 weeks, I believed the story I had told myself. I ran more. I slept through mornings I would previously have shared. I went to a dinner party and came home past midnight and thought, I can do this whenever I want. I told people I was doing well and meant it, or believed I meant it, or could not tell the difference, which at the time felt like the same thing. I moved apartments in May. Not because of her. The lease was ending. The new place had a second room I could use as an office. The light in the mornings was better. I set it up carefully. A desk that faced the window. A lamp I'd wanted for a year. Plants I was planning to remember to water. I made it look, from the inside, like a life someone had chosen on purpose. By month 3, the comparisons had become a daily condition. At a work event in June, I talked to someone new for 20 minutes. The conversation arrived nowhere. And I thought, for no reason I could name, about the specific way she asked questions that went somewhere. On a Sunday afternoon in July, I sat with the particular empty quality of a Sunday that has no shape to it, and no one to give it shape. In August, I went to dinner with someone a friend had introduced. Smart. Interesting. A good evening. And I spent the entire dinner aware that I was performing the version of myself with the ceiling, and that this person couldn't tell, and that she would have been able to tell inside 10 minutes. I told myself I was being too selective. The next one would be different. But I wasn't being selective. I was calibrating against a standard I had set and then abandoned. And the recalibration doesn't work. The standard stays where you left it. Month 5. A colleague had birthday drinks on a Tuesday. I went for an hour, talked to 4 people, came home at 9, changed out of work clothes, stood in the kitchen for a while, not knowing what I was going to do next. Opened the fridge, closed it, sat at the desk. The plants I'd been planning to water were dead by then. By month 6, I had stopped dating. Work had genuinely picked up, and I genuinely didn't have the bandwidth. And these were real things. That also functioned as a way of not sitting with the question of why nothing had cleared the bar. I had built a very quiet life, very deliberately. And it turned out to be exactly as quiet as I had asked for. Nothing happened that day to make it significant. That is the specific nature of these moments. They do not announce themselves. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I came home at 7. I sat at the desk that faced the window. The city was doing the things cities do in October at dusk, which is turn the light to that particular amber. That makes everything look briefly like a painting of itself. I wasn't working. I wasn't doing anything else either. I was just in the apartment, with the quiet. The thought arrived. Simple, not elaborate. I had been gone for 6 months, and I do not feel the way I thought I would feel. I had imagined something like resolution. Not happiness. I hadn't promised myself happiness. Just the settled quality of a decision correctly made. The feeling of having set something down and finding your hands lighter afterward. I had waited 6 months for that feeling. It had not arrived. What had arrived was a knowledge I'd been very carefully not thinking about. She had seen all of it. The 10 p.m. on a Sunday version. The fear I'd never fully named. The ceiling I maintained and called independence. The gap between the person who was good at being in rooms and the person who existed when the room's emptied. She had seen all of it. And she had stayed. Until I made staying impossible. And I had walked away from that. Not because anything was broken. Because I was frightened of it. There is a grief particular to things you damage that were not broken. It does not have clean language. It sits somewhere between the chest and the back of the throat. It is not dramatic. And it does not leave. I picked up the phone, opened her name, typed 3 words. Sat with my thumb above the screen for 11 minutes. I've spent a long time trying to understand what I was hoping to accomplish by sending it. I think I just needed the possibility to exist for a moment. The shape of the door. I can see the full shape of it now. I understand that the ceiling was not independence. It was a blueprint I absorbed at 9 years old, watching my father be present and absent simultaneously. And I built my entire emotional life on top of it, without ever questioning whether I wanted to live in the structure it produced. I understand that when she saw through the performance, naturally, without effort, simply because she was paying attention. I didn't feel known. I felt exposed. And exposed to someone who had spent 26 years carefully managing the ceiling. Felt like a threat. I understand that the story I told myself in March, about timing, about readiness, about not wanting to give her something fractured was technically true. And also a very clean cover. For being a man who was afraid of being fully inside something, with a person who could see him without the managed distance. I understand as she sat in that kitchen and said okay, and did not cry. And that what I read as composure was almost certainly something considerably more devastating than composure. And I understand that none of this changes anything. Understanding why you did a thing doesn't put it back. You cannot retroactively be present in the 14 months. You cannot unwalk home from the kitchen in March. The clarity is real. And the clarity arrives every time, just after the point where it could have changed anything. That is not a coincidence. That, I think, is what grief actually is. I deleted the message. Not because I had arrived anywhere. Not because I had worked through something and come out the other side. I deleted it because what I was about to do, reach back across 6 months of silence I created, with my name in 2 words, was ask her to absorb the weight of my clarity, as if it were something she owed me. She didn't owe me that. I don't know what the 6 months were for her. Whether they had the long, calibrating, unresolved quality they had for me. Or something simpler. Something with the shape of an ending. I don't know if she thinks about the Tuesday in March. I don't know if she set it down in a way I was never able to. I closed the phone. Went to the window. The city's still out there. Doing nothing in particular. The refrigerator starting its sound again. The apartment was very quiet. If this felt a little too familiar, if you recognized something in this, there are more stories like it waiting for you here. Somewhere tonight, there is someone sitting in the quiet they designed themselves, holding something they typed and did not send, trying to tell the difference between being careful and being afraid. And they have been sitting there a lot longer than 11 minutes.